I've been working on this project for the last few weeks, and I wanted to show it off a little bit. I'm calling it Tweaks for the moment. It does runtime code injection for Objective C. Um, so so Objective C is made to be dynamic by default. So what this does is it hooks into a running process and then exchanges the methods in that process for methods that we decide without the process knowing as it does this. And so I think the reason why I made this or am in the process of making this is that I think when mock and which is like the kernel that macOS and iOS are based off of, and Objective C are based off of sort of this like small talk park style like sort of ideas. Um, and those ideas emphasized dynamicness. And one of the big advantages of everything being dynamic was that you could modify the system around you when you didn't like what it did, right? This is one of the core promises of open source as well. I think the thing is that all kind of sucks, and that none of it really works very well. I mean, so the thing with Smalltalk is that it worked very well, but then nobody really adopted it. And then in Objective C, we pay the price for dynamicness, but we don't get the benefits as much as we really could. So um, here, I really want to be able to get those benefits so I can change applications and stuff like this whenever I want, as opposed to being unable to do so. Um, I think so. For the moment, I haven't gotten quite that far yet. I think there's a lot of stuff with UIKit that is kind of complicated. So we'll look at a simple example. So let's say I have this counter app that I really love, right? So every half second, it prints out a value called counter, right? So it prints out the counter, and it increases by one every time. But let's say I want to make it increase by two every time, right? In the world as stands, that's basically impossible, right? Like it just rewrite it, right? I mean, for this application, it's obviously pretty trivial, but if if I wanted to change the calendar app, then my only option would be to like rewrite the calendar app, right? And that's basically impossible, or way too difficult for me to try. So so let's see what we can do. So this thing is running right now. So I've made this tiny, shitty CLI to do this. So what we do is we get the PID, right, of this whole thing, and it turns out it's 23,375. Okay, so 23,375. And then what we do is so we can say, okay, what are all the classes? So here's what we do. So first we get the executable image. So the executable image is the image that so images are like places where um, stuff comes from. So like executables and things like this, and dynamic libraries. So every class or every piece of functionality comes from a particular image. So in this case, we're getting the executable image, which is sort of the equivalent of like the main the main thing for the app, as opposed to any like libraries. So in this case, it's as you can see, I developed this myself, and it's just this location. Okay, so let's say we want to get all the classes that are inside this image. It turns out there's only one, and it's called counter. Okay, so what are all the methods in this image in this class? So there's one. So there's one called init, and there's one called getValue. And you can see if you look at this type thing that it returns an integer. Yeah, it returns, and then this, essentially this means, so this is the return value, and then this means various things. Again, this interface isn't super cleaned up yet. I hope to make this a real app, or in SwiftUI or something like this. But I'm still in the middle, so I just have this shitty CLI. And then all this stuff is just internal things for myself. I'm actually pretty proud that I managed to get the inter-process communication down to 800 microseconds. Anyway, okay, so it turns out that there's one thing called get value, uh, and so what if we made the value just return this get value just return the same number every time, right? So what we can do is we can make a new project. So we have this new project, and I already made the shell of this. It's called better counter. Pretty standard alpha-NF object. Okay, so it has. So what we're doing is we redefine get value, and this is the prototype, which you can just again extract from here. I did this manually, but eventually I want to be able to do this automatically. So it's just called. So we have one value, one method, one selector, get value. Okay, and so there's like an integer behind it. That's not super important because my biggest concern is just making it output funny numbers. So we're going to make it return 69. So now we have a different counter, right? We have our better counter. It returns, it just returns 69 every time. So what we're hoping is that instead of printing out these numbers, it'll just print out 69 every time. Yeah. So let's see if we can try to do that. So, okay, so first we'll just build better counter. Oops. Build it. And then, okay, so we just created this new better counter, right? So we had the old counter that's the only class here, and then we have a better counter, and we're redefining get value on it. So first what we have to do is, oh god. Okay, so okay, we'll just ignore this. So first what we have to do, yes, okay, great. Okay, sorry. So first what we have to do is we have to load this dilib into the other process, right? So we just did that. So what we did is we called load dilib with this with the location of our dilib, and we can look at what this does in here. So what it does is it just calls load dilib, and it passes it over to the other process. So this dilib injected library is currently resident in the other process, and it's doing basically like RPC with that. So that calls the load dilib function in the injected library, which is currently running in the counters process. And then, so load dilib is very simple. It just calls one thing. It just get back handler, and it prints out the DL error. So it passes back the handler, which you can see is this long thing. The handle, I mean. And the handle is just the location at which this dilib was loaded into the process. So you can see that so it was loaded successfully, so we're all good. And then from now, what we have to do is, and again, this interface is bad, and I know it, and I'm not trying to defend it, but it's what I have right now. So what we do now is we call switch. So the switch thing, it takes two arguments. So it takes the old class, which is counter, and that's the class we're switching things on, and it takes the new class, which is better counter, and then it takes an argument of what selectors we're overriding, and we're going to override get value in this case. So just to make the moment of truth a little bit nicer, you can see that as I run this, it changes to 69. Yeah, nice. Cool. And yeah, this is like obviously like a test or contrived example, but I think it's possible to do something like this on views in a on views, and make applications that are doing dumb things better. and I'm really excited for that. I think it could be really cool. Yeah, and all this is open source. Like github.com/Sophia Wisdom/tweaks. Yeah, thanks.